Yeah, the Berlin scene in the 80s wasn't that big. And there were a few people started, there was kind of transition. The transition where electronic music in the dance form as we know it started to get developed basically. And I would say there were about maybe 10 people.
Really?
10 producers, 10 DJs, who were playing at that time. I made my first kind of housey record in '85. It was under the name Ready Made. And the scene, the whole Berlin vibe was very much still more in this kind of dark new wave type, which was developed in Berlin, like with Einstürze Neubauten and with Malaria, this band, and the scene was very small. One guy which already had a club at that time, which is very famous these days, his name is Dimitri Hegemann. He used to run a club was called UFO, which was basically the only club, I would say, where you would find house music, even early techno music. And the guy now is known because he runs Tresor.
Really?
So he was already going at that time, And he also had a bar, which was called Fischbüro, the fish office, which was kind of the hangout where we kind of, went for evenings, because the club was only open on Saturday. And that's where we basically met, and there was the Hard Wax record store, which was also a meeting point, and which was the source of the new music basically. And before Hard Wax was opened, I think Hard Wax opened in '98. And before that there was also a record shop which was specialized in dance music, but not so much only electronic as we know, but also disco, Italo disco, whatever, soul, R&B, and that place was called Pinky. Nobody these days talks about Pinky, but Moritz von Oswald and myself, we always went to buy records in Pinky, because that was the only place where we could find records from Chicago, like, from Farley Checkmaster Funk, or from Larry Heard, Mr. Fingers, and this early stuff, I only got to know about the Chicago house stuff in '85, and I got to know about the Detroit scene in '88. So in that sense, many of the things we did were out of the blue, in a way, We just was trying to make, as I said, with Kraftwerk, we tried to find our own voice. We tried to develop our own style. But once we discovered the Detroit scene, for example, which was very dear to us, we immediately fell in love with that music. Then it became a strong connection to the Detroit scene. No. I mean, I think, as far as I know, the people I know, they didn't come from the rock side. They would come more from, say, the experimental music side.
Like Kraftwerk, or?
Kraftwerk, yeah. Kraftwerk was, in a good way, pop music, I think. And obviously it was influenced also by pop music, and it was certainly influenced by Kraftwerk. But, when I say influenced, I don't necessarily mean that the people wanted to sound like Kraftwerk, but they were more inspired by their ideas. By their ideas of the man and the machine. And they were inspired by their way how they developed their unique style. I think that was maybe the most important lesson you got from Kraftwerk in terms of inspiration, that they find their own style and they develop their own musical ideas which were completely independent from any other things, you know. And I think that was for me and for my friends I was working with at the time. That was the main inspiration. It was never the way that we thought we would like to sound like Kraftwerk, or we would like to be robots. That was more their view of the world. But we were interested and we were inspired by the way they developed their view of the world, you know. The scene has changed a lot, and obviously I think it's good because it's a variation of many different styles. You can, when you come to Berlin to want to know something about music, you can really find interesting new things, which is rare, you know. Normally, new music needs some time to get exposed to the audience. In Berlin, it's quite easy because there's so many spaces, and people, you know, if you want to do something on a Wednesday, they say, okay, just try it out, you know. So it's still a space where you can develop your own ideas, and you can find your own audience. Now, say on the weekend these days, Berlin is full of party tourists. And sometimes this can be a little complex because many of those tourists, they know Berlin has a good party scene, but when they come and go out to the clubs, and not all of them, but many of them, they just like to get drunk and, you know, get hammered and really just don't really care so much about who is playing the music. You know, obviously the taste is still quite, the level of the quality is still quite high, yeah? But sometimes the club owners these days say, why should I pay a DJ so much money? I can get it for half price from this DJ and he has the same records. So what the thing is, there you have many people who are just copying what is already there and not so much finding their own style. When you do it, you never think of it. You know, in the beginning, we felt, you know, that's just what we wanted to do, but it was not something where we could see it would develop into something so big. Impossible. Once you do something, as I said, you know, the scene was so small. We all knew each other, and we all had not such expectations. That only came in the early 90s. That at least the scene in Berlin got bigger, you know. I mean, one of the major facts which changed Berlin was when the wall came down. And that was really a big change, not so much only for the audience, but for the city. You could find clubs, you could find easy spaces where you could sort of set up your club for the weekend even. You know, bring in 2 tables, you bring in 5 crates of beer, and then you had your own club basically, you know, 2 record players and a system. So it was a moment of invention. And the reason or the way it was invented is it had to be cheap. It had to be mobile. There was no big decoration going on, you know. It was just maybe because there was no lights, so there was no light. You know, it was just dark. There was just a little light where the DJ was, and the rest was dark. You know, so it was basically an invention and a time where you had to invent things, and often you have to make something out of nothing. So it was very much. Not so much we designed it to be dark, but because it was dark because there was no light, you know.